If you think of most people think of good deeds as something that applies only to themselves. A good deed is I pray, I give charity, I do good, I don't use bad words, I don't do this or that or the other. I stay away from bad things and I try to do good things. In other words, people associate good deeds with things that they have to do themselves. But we have two kinds of deeds. Deeds that impact us and deeds that impact others. There are two kinds of deeds. When you make salah, who does it impact? You, yourself. When you give sadaqah, it impacts you, but it also impacts someone else. When you lie, it impacts you, but it also impacts someone else. Now the thing is, if you just worried about the good things that impact you, right? And you didn't take much concern that people around you are doing things, they're not fulfilling their responsibilities, and them not fulfilling their responsibilities doesn't just hurt them, who else does it hurt? Others also. You have an obligation to others who are being hurt. You have an obligation to speak up and stand up and say the truth. You have to do it. And this is a matter of human decency. The simplest example of this you can think of. And it really takes courage to do that. To speak up when you say somebody else might be harmed if I don't say something. Right? This is part of tawasi bil haq. I should genuinely counsel this person, because if I don't, it will end up harming someone else. Your mother, your daughter, your sister, your wife, or husband, somebody's doing something wrong in the family. They're doing an injustice. They're not giving the mahar, or they're not giving the right amount in inheritance. And it's happening in front of your eyes. And you say to your inner consciousness, I should say something. I should say this is wrong. But then you think, what are the consequences? I'm gonna get yelled at. They're gonna think I'm so, arrogant. They're gonna stop talking to me. There are lots of other consequences. So whenever you start speaking about the truth, what comes to mind? These other consequences. But Allah Azza wa Jal has relieved us or removed these fears from us, because all of our fears and our worries are removed when Allah says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. That first part. When you have iman, what happens? Who are you afraid of now? Only Allah. Only Allah. And when you do righteous deeds, then that iman only gets strengthened. And when that iman is strengthened, it is only then that it's easy for you to do tawasi bil haq. And if you find it difficult to do tawasi bil haq, you know what that means? That means that the iman is not strong enough. The iman isn't strong enough. The two things become tied to each other. The courage to speak up and stand for the truth is directly connected to iman. It's directly connected to it. Now actually, let's look at the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri first. من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان. Not أضعف العمل, but أضعف الإيمان. He says, whoever sees a bad thing happen, he should change it with his hand. This is tawasi bil haq too. If he can't do it, he should change it with what? He should try to change it with his tongue. He should speak up against it. If he can't even do that, he should at least feel bad about it in his heart. And that would be the weakest case of iman. Allah didn't say that would be the weakest course of the Messenger didn't say that would be the weakest course of action. It would be the weakest faith. So He connected the idea of encouraging people to stick to the truth and to do something about being truthful. He connected that directly to iman. Just like this surah does. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and then immediately وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. The three become connected. So when we talk about encouraging, sharing the truth with non-Muslims or our non-Muslim neighbors and the society at large, all of that is true. But where does it begin? It begins within our own household. And that's the hardest place to begin. But this is really the place where we have to begin this tawasi bil haq. You have to look at the injustices and the wrongs and the violations of the basic principles of iman that may be happening in your own family, and you have to speak out against them. It is much easier for me to sit behind a table and a mic and a camera and speak about these things to strangers. Much harder to speak these things in front of Allah. This is persevering. It also implies commitment. In other words, you never get lazy, you never slack off. You remain committed, like you're committed to getting to work on time every day. Or you're committed to handing the assignment in before it's due. Commitment. It also implies constancy. In other words, your commitment doesn't fluctuate, it doesn't go up and down. It's the same. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, in defining sabr, he said, it is to have the same level of obedience to Allah in ease or in difficulty. If you can have the same level of obedience to Allah, whether times are easy or they are difficult, then you have exercised the quality of as-sabr. That's what sabr is. So now, but Allah doesn't say, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَصَبَرُوا. This is very important. They encouraged each other and counseled each other to the best of their ability, with sincerity, truthfully, to the truth and to the obligations that they owe. And Allah didn't continue by saying, and they were patient in doing so. He didn't just say they were patient. He went a step further and said, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, which teaches us something huge. Not only is sabr included now, meaning they were patient, they were perseverant, they remained constant, but they encouraged each other in remaining patient and constant and persevering. You know what that teaches us? You cannot keep your sabr. You need someone to counsel you and give you strength and say, listen, you need to have sabr. We need to feed, sabr feeds off of each other. You know, the strength comes from the other. Sabr, the way it's described in the most simple terms is ala al-masa'ib, meaning you have to be patient, perseverant, remain constant no matter how difficult things get. Wasbir ala ma asabak, persevere no matter what calamity falls upon you. That's one meaning. Guess who shaitan's after? The people who are trying to serve this deen. So that he will tempt them with disobedience to Allah in their private moments more than anyone else. They are more susceptible. They are more under attack. So you have to have sabr from falling into disobedience to Allah. And then you have to have sabr on the obedience to Allah, meaning obedience to Allah can become difficult. And you have to remain perseverant. And you have to, there are among us, these are real stories. This is not some theory. Allah speaks to us, He talks about us, and He knows what kind of lives we lead. فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ. And it is your own mention. The first comment is all of these are mentioned in the past tense. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, past tense. وَعَمِلُوا, past tense. وَتَوَاصَوْا, all past tense. What's the benefit of that? What's the difference between saying that and saying إِلَّا الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ وَيَعْمَلُونَ الصَّالِحَاتِ وَيَتَوَاصَوْنَ بِالْحَقِّ وَيَتَوَاصَوْنَ بِالصَّبْرِ? Why not mention it in the present tense? Mentioning it in the past tense implies these are people who lived their entire life doing it, and until the moment they died. So you can look back at their entire life and you'll be able to say, yes, they fulfilled the rights of Iman. Yes, when you look at their life, you say these people did good. And they did tawasi bil haqq and they did tawasi bil sabr. In other words, this is almost a fulfillment of the ayah, وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. Don't you dare die except that you're Muslims. When you're looking back at their life, you don't say they used to be good and then they failed, tapered off. Until the end of their life, they were committed, so you can look back at them and say, they fulfilled all four of these things. So by mentioning them in the past, it is an illustration that their entire life represents these behaviors, until death came to them. These are the people. In other words, you can never just stop. You can never just look, you have to reach the point where you can look back, or people will look back at your entire life and be able to say, all these four conditions were met. This is